This is Dance Studio 411, where we answer your real-life questions about your toughest studio life predicaments. Parent problems, teacher turnover, student challenges, policy dilemmas, and so much more. Let's talk about what's keeping you awake at night and what you can do about it. Here are your hosts, Suzanne Blake Garrity and Jill Tyrone.
Welcome to this episode of the Dance Studio 411 podcast. I'm Jill Tyrone, and today's episode is all about the wonderful benefits of having a student assistant program at your dance studio. My special guest is Ginger Haithcox of Haithcox Business Solutions and Modern Motion. Ginger owns Modern Motion Dance School and is a Ramsey Solutions Master Financial Coach and a professional photographer. She has been a guest on Back to Dance, the National Consortium for Creative Placemaking podcast, presented multiple seminars for Dance Studio Owner and the Energize Conference, and was a guest speaker for IDEA member webinars on topics including unique performance groups, costuming during supply chain shortages, and CRM for studio owners. She is a member of IDEA, DanceStudioOwner.com, and the Life Coach School, Self-Coaching Scholars and Volunteers as a lead standards accreditation visitor with American Camp Association, otherwise known as the ACA. She has created the Certificate of Dance Entrepreneurship program, as well as the Studio Ambassador System for fellow dance studio owners. As you'll hear today, Ginger is passionate about empowering women, building sustainable businesses through systems, and I'm proud to say that she's also a friend of mine. So Ginger, welcome. I'm so excited to have you here today.
Thank you so much. Glad to be here.
Before we dive into this amazing content that you have for us, why don't you tell us a little more about you and your journey to where you are now? You and I connect on so many levels when it comes to systems, processes, organization, things that just make everything better in the dance studio world. So give us a little bit of background on how you have become where you are today and all the amazing things that you're doing.
Thank you, Jill. So one of the things that I have done, in addition to growing my studio over the last 15 years, I also worked in multiple nonprofit organizations, most notably Girl Scouts, running the cookie program and summer camps, as well as adult training, and also in various churches and camps. And so a lot of what I do within the studio is influenced by some of the systems, processes, organizational, and corporate structures that I learned in those other organizations. And so it gives me kind of a background in things like understanding HR in ways that are really useful in the studio environment, where I have a kind of split background, some in the arts and some in working in the nonprofit industry.
That's one of the things that I draw on too. I have my business background and then my dance background, and it's an amazing connection when you can put them together. It really gives you an opportunity to see things from more than one side. It gives you a nice 360 perspective on your customers, the faculty and staff that you're working with, the students that you're working with. So let's dive right in. Let's start talking about your student assistant program. You have 3 tips today for our listeners. And the first one is student retention and progression. So give us a little bit of background on the program itself, how it came to be, and then let's talk about how this ties right into retention and progression, because that is so important right now. We want to retain those students in the studio.
Absolutely. So when we first started our studio, we could tell right away that we had a ton of little ones and one teacher. And I said, you know what? We have a few middle school students. Maybe we can get them to help out. And immediately that turned into, well, we've got to train this person. And we need to have a way to evaluate them that doesn't kind of show favoritism. Also figuring out, how do we compensate them? Is it a volunteer position? Do we give them free classes? Who knows? And so we really started to create a program actually around our first student assistant at our studio. So over the years, we continue to build it out, and essentially they're an extension of our staff. They provide so much for us, and we provide so much for them in terms of life skills and things like that. Getting into student retention and progression, I think that having a student assistant program within your studio is really useful. We know that students are looking for a sense of belonging. You don't want to just attend somewhere and have the t-shirt. You want to feel like you're wanted, you're valuable, you're an important part of that community, that people will miss you if you're absent. And so having this gives a way for kids to get involved in something, and they don't necessarily need to be part of the competition or intensive programs. They have something that they can do as they get older and be a part of a group. The other piece with this is we've built in progression. So they start out with just learning the basics, how to control the music, leading some basic activities for the kids, helping them with going to the bathroom and all the things that happen during cold and flu season. And then they progress to being able to lead the warm up, or they learn the entirety of the choreography for the recital and they can help the teacher with that. And then there's a third piece of the progression where then they are well qualified to basically be a dance teacher. They're just not old enough. And so it helps them to kind of feel empowered about what they're doing, that what they're doing is an important part of what's happening in the studio. They feel valued. And then they, in turn, are kind of showing this role model, a midpoint for students to see, okay, I'm a student and I'm 6 years old. I see a 13-year-old assistant, and that's something I could be one day. And I've also found, interestingly enough, when students drop off, whether it's for winter or fall sports, or they decide they want to try cheerleading, or they don't even want to dance anymore, I said it, they still stay in our ambassador program. And so we have roughly a third of our ambassadors, some of them don't even dance with us anymore, but they're still on and they volunteer with us on a weekly basis to assist in classes, to help out with events and everything like that. And to me, that's a real testament to our program because they see the value in it and they love being part of that group.
That's amazing. I didn't realize that in all the times that we've been talking over the last year about your ambassador program. And I didn't realize that you had students that actually stay on, even if they're no longer interested in dance or their lives happen to take them in different directions. That is a true testament to you, Ginger, and your studio and this amazing program. I was taking notes while you were talking because this is so good. This is a really good, important part of retention and keeping those students in the door. Patty, Riley, and I did a webinar recently for our dance studio owner members, and we were talking all about retention with Shanna Kirkpatrick. This is just yet another level to really stand out from your competitors, to really stand out in that crowded market. And I wrote down, opportunities. Can you also use, or can your students also use this towards community hours that they need for different school projects?
Absolutely. We have our students, they essentially have a timesheet. It's kind of funny because, it's 12 years old with a timesheet, but think of how that translates to them being prepared for their future in the workforce. So they do a timesheet, their hours get logged, and last season, there was over 1,200 logged hours of volunteerism amongst our ambassadors. That's a huge amount of human resource going through the studio. In addition, we've had students use these hours for their Girl Scout programs, for their Honor Society programs, and even one of our high school ambassadors, she received the commendation from President Biden for her volunteer hours. So it's definitely something that they can add to their resumes and college applications as well.
It's so good. This is one of those opportunities too, because students, I think, especially now more than ever, and I know we keep saying that as we come out, further and further post-COVID and things like this, right. But the students are behind in their social skills. They're not quite where they need to be when it comes to learning how to manage life, let alone manage a classroom or just be on a different level of interaction with other students and other faculty and staff in your studio. So this is a great way, just such a great learning opportunity for these brilliant, wonderful young beings.
Yes.
All right. So moving into our little second topic here, and I don't even want to call it little because it's really important, creating a future pipeline for dance studio staff. So Ginger, let's elaborate about how this program feeds into keeping and retaining your faculty and staff and how it gives you that pipeline where you can just dip right into that when you need to.
Yeah. I feel like this is really important because so many people are searching for staff, whether it's teachers or people in administration with your studio. It's a challenge sometimes to find not just someone who's qualified, but somebody that truly fits the culture of your studio. Do they fit the vibe of what you're trying to do in your community? And so, one, you're creating a way for students who want to be a dance teacher or work in the office or, do business skills like that, a chance for them to try on what this career might look like at a young age. This is so valuable. We have several of our staff who are actually in college and they're doing their Masters of Education in Dance. And I was just talking to one of them last night and I said, they're getting prepared for the K-12 environment within a school district and meeting standards. When they get to a studio, a private business, they're lost a lot of times. They don't know how to work with these little ones who want to hug them and put their boogies on them. And they just want to run around the room. And they're like, I wasn't prepared for this. What can I do? On the flip side, I also have 16 and 17-year-old ambassadors who walk into that same classroom and they're like, all right, let's go. They do the clapping thing. 1, 2, 3, eyes on me. They're so prepared. And so it creates a system to actually grow up your own staff, your future staff. We've had several of our ambassadors actually get hired, whether they're as teachers or in our front desk environment. And it's so helpful because you don't have to do the same level of training. You don't have to give them an orientation to your organization. You already have references for them. And so it makes things, I think, really, you can see the possibilities and build out new systems. When you're doing this, you're focusing not just on their technical skills on the dance floor, you're focusing on their life skills. And so it's creating a future pipeline for dance studios, and it's also creating employable future people in the workplace, people who can creatively problem solve, who can see a situation that might be high stress, but they know how to break it down into smaller pieces and how to deal with it. A 17-year-old who can handle backstage things and take tickets at a recital and answer customer service questions. That's a huge asset. We can use them in those ways, and we're giving them so much hands-on experience. And this is before they even get to college, before they even make an investment and say, I'm going to go do this and I'm going to pay all this money to study this major or go into education or go into business, only to find I really don't like this or I really do love this. And it can kind of help them figure out their path as well.
That's great. You focused on, you mentioned confidence and the level of confidence that these students have in your program is evident. And I can see it just in the photos that you have shared on social media and on your website. It makes a big difference. And the fact that you can draw from this well of students that have grown up in your culture and they know it and they've learned it, it ties right into our next point, which is really enhancing your customer experience. We talk a lot about customer experience here at Revolution. And one of the big things that we want to do is make sure that everybody feels special, that everybody is attended to, that we listen to what is happening, whether the feedback is positive or negative. So let's talk now about how your ambassador program and these lovely students at your studio that are in this program actually enhance and help your customer experience.
Absolutely. So the first thing that comes to my mind is that all your little ones get extra special attention. It's not just one teacher and 12 students. In most cases for us, we've got one teacher, 2 ambassadors with that same number of students. That's extra high fives, extra hugs, extra attention, extra, hey, sweetie, are you okay? You look like you're having a hard day. So that's adding to your culture and your community. And it's also creating an environment where these little kids have an older kid to look up to. So it's not so scary when they get on the bus and they see somebody from the studio. They know somebody else. The other thing is the customers are absolutely blown away by the maturity and the ability for these young people to articulate themselves. We have our ambassadors. They know how to greet people for a birthday party. They go ahead and do the shoe fittings with our Revolution fitting kits, of course. And they know how to size the shoes, write down the size, get them to the website. They can do these things, and that helps the front desk, but it also helps the customers to see like, wow, my kid is going to a place that's not just dance classes and happy tappy tutus. They're also in a place where like, these young people are empowered to like speak up and do things. The other thing I think it's so important is the community building. The ambassadors engage in community building and also community service. They have a spring cleaning that we do at our studio, and they're learning how to beautify the environment where we are. Our studio is actually in a historical district, and our neighbors are like, it's actual residences, it's houses. And so beautifying the space, beautifying the street, doing things in our community for whether it's the food bank or performing at a local festival, service projects to help younger children. It makes it so that they're connecting with their community, and that enhances the customer service and the customer experience because they're seeing like, we're not just this thing operating in a vacuum and it's just our families and friends coming to our recital. We're taking the show on the road. We're broadening our reach and spreading our message of positivity, bringing joy to other people outside of our studio environment. And so, yeah, like I mentioned, they assist in class, they assist at recital, they do birthday parties with us, all our events, like we do a pumpkin painting event, they help out with that. And these people are seen throughout the studio and they're known as like, hey, this person's a great resource, this person is a great support for my child. They can answer some basic questions and they're so happy to be there. And I did want to touch on something. You mentioned like the confidence piece. Most of the sixth graders who enter the program, they're not there yet. It's kind of like starting all over with the 3-year-old class. They don't necessarily know what they're doing. They kind of stand back and they're like, oh my gosh. And we teach them, like that's part of that progression, how to talk to little ones. They don't know. They don't know how to talk to a 3-year-old. They don't know how to lead them and how to nurture them. That some of the questions I get, like, I don't want to be too mean. I don't want them to cry. It's like, okay, well, but we can still talk to them. You don't have to be scared of them. So I think that progression builds up that confidence. We've seen ambassadors where we're writing on their reviews, sweetie, you got to speak up more so that you're projecting your voice and they can understand clear directions. Break it down. Don't give them 5 things to do. Say, take off your shoes, full stop. Put them in the cubby, full stop. And so they're learning those things. And so, yes, by the end of it, by the time they're an assistant teacher, they're golden. They've got the confidence. They're speaking up. They're taking chances outside of the studio as well. They're applying to colleges and they're going on interviews and they're doing all these other things with the confidence that has come from realizing their skill set.
I love this so much because, as you know, I'm raising 2 daughters, and the confidence level is so important. And as they grow into young women heading out into the world, we want them to be really self-sufficient. We want them to be confident. We want them to be, productive members of society. And that's exactly what your program gives. So let's do a quick recap. And then I want to elaborate on how they can implement this program into the studio, and talking about how we have some resources for them and the actual program is available that you've put together. So number 1 is this ambassador and student assistant program really focuses in on student retention and progression, and it gives them a path. And then also it gives the studio owner a way to have a future pipeline for your dance studio faculty and staff. It gives you a nice well to draw from right in your own studio. And then lastly, that we talked about is enhancing the customer experience so that your families feel really welcome in your studio, that everybody knows what's happening. These ambassadors are greeting people well. And then you're just building the confidence, like you mentioned, that's so important to these young students. So this is great. Ginger, let's talk about how we have your program and how people can actually learn to implement this in their own studio. So now that we learned why, how do we implement it? And then where can we go?
So what we did is we took the Studio Ambassador system and broke down all the pieces. how do you get started? Where do you find the students that are ideal for the program? What kind of staff should be running the program for you? The training, the recognition, and also the evaluation process that goes with it. And so we've shared those resources from our studio: position descriptions, training outlines, ideas for special recognition. And we made it available through the Revolution Dance website, the Learning Library.
That's great. Yes. And the link will be posted when we post the podcast. So look for that. It's learn.revolutiondance.com. But Ginger, I want to really stress to our studio owners today that this is a program that you have nurtured and implemented, and you've improved on it over the years. This is a solid program that you've even shared your full manual. So this is an amazing opportunity for you to go. And if this is interesting to you, which I'm hoping it is to most everybody that needs to really think about student retention and really developing these young students that we have today into confident people as they go into their high school years, it's learn.revolutiondance.com. That's our learning library where you'll find Ginger's course along with other courses as well. And we're adding to that as we go through and build on this library. So Ginger, gosh, thank you so much for sharing your expertise today and your time. These are wonderful tips. I could talk to you honestly about this program all day long because it's what we do. I have assistants in my class. I love teaching them to teach. It's what it just lights me on fire. I think it's one of the most amazing things that we can share. All of the confidence, all of the things that we know and comes so naturally after we've been teaching for a while, and we know how to manage the classroom, and we know how to manage the days where they're just not having a good day and we have to pivot so quickly. But these are not natural things as you just kind of grow up and get put into a classroom. You have to learn them and develop them. Again, thank you for sharing your time today. Our listeners are going to get so much out of these tips that you've shared. I know this is a short little podcast, but you can find the entire system that Ginger has in the Learning Library, learn.revolutiondance.com. Link will be in the show notes. So Ginger, anything else to close out today that you want to share?
I'm just going to say one thing. If you're thinking about it, but you think maybe like, wow, I don't know how I'm going to do it, I say just go for it. Start with one student. Just start somewhere. Don't spend all your time spinning your wheels and trying to figure out how to get it going. Just go for it.
I love that. That's great advice. Go for it. Go get the system and implement it at your studio. Just start small and then build on it from there. You're going to love it. So thanks, Ginger.
Thank you so much, Jill.
Thanks for listening to this episode of Dance Studio 411. Visit us online at dancestudio411.com for more great resources and to submit a question for a future episode. Our number one goal is to help you build a successful dance studio business and keep your passion for dance alive.